Hello and welcome to this Nexus ISP tutorial for free PBX. In this tutorial we're going to talk about setting up a SIP account or SIP trunk on your PBX as well as an extension, and then creating inbound and outbound routes so that you can receive and make calls from your extension. So let's get started. First you'll need to log in. To do that you'll get your login details from your activation email that's provided by Nexus, as well as the IP address to put in your address bar in your browser. Once you've logged in you'll get a sort of dashboard that will give you system status, etc. And for now we're going to go straight to connectivity, click on trunks, and we're going to begin to create our trunk. So first things first, we click on add, go to SIP, we give the trunk a name. In my case I like to give the trunk the same name as the number it's associated to, just keeps things neat and easy to read later down the line. Outbound caller ID should typically be the same. You can go through all the different options here. You'll notice with free PBX every single option has a little question mark which you can hover over and it'll give you a lot more information. Should you still not understand it, there's a lot of information on the internet as well. But for now, in this general settings, all you really need are those two. We're then going to go straight to SIP settings, and this is where we set up the magic for it to actually register for outgoing and incoming calls. Again, trunk name, I'm going to keep it the same, make it simple. Take that information out, and I'm just going to do a quick copy and paste of information that are already pre-created, and we'll discuss it one by one. So you'll need a host equals and the SIP registration address, which is for the Nexus network, is sip.nexus.coza. Your username should be your telephone number in full country format as supplied in the email. From user is exactly the same. Secret is the password. This is the password we supplied for that particular VoIP number to you. Type equals friend, and insecure equals port, comma. I'm not sure if you can see that that's a comma, it's not a full stop, so it's insecure equals port, comma, invite. That's all we need for the outgoing settings. Let's go to incoming. User context. Later down the line, when we start working more intensely with routing and so on and so forth, when it comes to reporting as well, it is handy to know exactly what context we were dealing with when a call came through. So I'm going to give this a simple inbound underscore and the number. So anytime I see this, I know that that inbound call actually came from the user or person calling this specific number. I'm going to take this out here. Again, I just a little copy and paste to make things quick for myself. So we've got secret equals and the voice over IP password, type equals peer, context equals from dash trunk. We can maybe talk about that in later videos, but that's the default inbound trunk. And NAT equals no. That's quite important. We are on a hosted PBX in the cloud. We're not behind a NAT router as one would be if you had your sort of own PBX running in your office. So we would put NAT equals no in this case. Registration string, that's quite simple as well. It's essentially just going to be your number, a colon, the password, at the domain sip.nexus.coza / and our CLI or our telephone number, again in country format. That is essentially it for adding a SIP trunk, so we click on submit. And you'll notice immediately we get this red button up the top here that says apply config. In free PBX, every time you make a change, you will always get this button, because until you click that button, whatever changes you've made are not actually committed on the back end. So we're going to go ahead and click apply to commit those changes, and that's it. Now we should have a trunk registered on the Nexus network for this specific number, and to check to make sure that we haven't put anything in incorrectly, perhaps the wrong password, whatever the case may be, we need to check that it is actually registered. To do this, we go to reports, *info, and you can then go to either registry or SIPChan, whichever one you want. I prefer just going to registries, and as you can see immediately, there it is. We are state registered. There's our username, and it is registered at sip.nexus.coza on port 5060, which is our default for voice over IP. And that is it for adding a trunk. We now need to add an extension, because at this point, if somebody were to call this number, nothing would happen. The PBX doesn't know what to do with it. It's registered, and that's all good and well, but it still doesn't know where to send the call to. This being a PBX, we need to have extensions. So you normally have your sales extension, your support extension, your billing extension. When you get a bit more advanced, it'll be queues. there'll be agents and all sorts. We'll have an IVR that will pick up and say, welcome to Nexus ISP, dial 1 for sales, 2 for support, 3 for billing, etc. In this case and in this video, we're going to keep it simple, and we're just going to create one extension, and we're going to have all inbound calls route directly to that extension, no IVR or anything funny in between. So let's get ready and let's go ahead and make that extension. So you go to application, go to extensions. We're going to add a new extension. We're going to choose CHAN SIP since we're dealing with voice over IP. Extension user, I'm just going to give 1000 as the extension. The outbound CID, that is our call-out identity essentially. Normally you would just make sure that this is the same as the number of the SIP trunk itself, so we'll go ahead and do that. You'll notice now that a password has automatically been generated for us. It is of paramount importance that we use a very, very strong password when creating any extension on our PBX. So you'll notice this is quite a long, arduous little password we got here, and that's quite important. The reason being is that any PBX in the cloud or on the internet is obviously open up to the entire web, and security then becomes an immediate concern. There are nefarious characters out there that run scripts in the internet and scan for any computer on the internet that is running a PBX. When they find one, then they start using what's called a brute force attack, where they'll try and log in using any type of extension starting from 1 through to whatever. So in this case they might try 1000, and then they'll try millions of different password combinations until they eventually get it right. So again, the longer the password, the more safe your account is going to be. What we've also done to ensure that it's a little safer is you'll notice this message at the top here saying that we're not running on the standard voice over IP port. So your PBX is actually running on port 15060. The default is just 5060. Basically we've just popped a 1 in front. Again, the reason being is to sort of get around these scanners that are out there on the internet that specifically scan for any computer running an open port on 5060, which is the default SIP or voice over IP port. As soon as they find that port open, they go on to try and brute force in with combinations of different usernames and passwords till they find a way in. Why is that a problem? Well, if they do get into your as an extension, well, they can basically just run up a massive telephone bill, and it's quite common, and it's known as toll hijacking. So you definitely need to make sure that you have an extremely strong password, and we don't allow you to change this setting. So in your Zoiper, if you're using Zoiper as an app on a mobile phone to connect to your PBX, or if you're using a Yealink desk phone or a Grandstream, whatever the case may be, keep in mind that when you do put in the details to register your extension with your PBX, that you are not going to be using port 5060, you're going to use port 15060. The username would then be 1000, and the password would be this long password over here. Right, let's go on. User management settings. We don't really need to create a user for every extension we create, so I'm just going to click on none. We just need a basic extension. That's it. Let's go on to voicemail. We do want to have voicemail enabled, so should the user not answer his phone, it'll get put straight to voicemail. The rest of the settings, again, you can go through. We do need to give it a password. I'm just going to give it something simple. In this case, we can get away with a very simple password, because the only time that this password is actually requested is when someone is already registered as an extension on our PBX and they want to check their voicemail messages. So you can put a simple password there. In terms of require same extension, well, that basically just tells us that if the user is checking his voicemail from his own extension, he doesn't need to put a password in. So we'll just leave that as no, we don't want them to require the same extension. We can just let them do whatever they like. The next thing we can look at is giving an email address. This is quite handy, and we can say email attachment and delete voicemail. What that would then do is it would send an email of any voice message to this email address. It will attach the voice message itself, and it would then delete it from our PBX system so as to save space. This is usually something that I would normally recommend doing, but in this example I'm not going to bother because obviously it's not going to be used that much. Again, under advanced settings, we shouldn't need to change anything. You can go through it all if you like. I would just leave it as is. So let's go ahead and click submit. Once we click submit, once again we get the apply config, so let's just go ahead and apply that. And that's it. Essentially now we have a trunk and we have an extension. The difference being is that no calls can be made or received yet. The reason for that is we don't have any inbound or outbound routes. We need to tell the PBX what to do if it receives a call and what to do if an extension is trying to make a call. So how do we do that? Well, we go to connectivity, we go to inbound routes, and we say add route. I'm just going to give it a simple name, inbound. What this is saying is DID number. So any DID number that comes in, we'll treat it under this rule. Any call line identity, we'll treat it under this rule. What are we going to do with our incoming call? We're going to route it through to our extension. So under set destination, we need to choose the actual extension. You can either choose queues, RVRs, etc., etc. We'll get to these all later. For now, we're going to go straight and simple to the extension. When I click extension, the list of extensions will come up. In our case, there is only one extension. This is the sales extension. So obviously, we're going to select that. Again, you've got more settings under advanced, privacy, other. You're welcome to go through those. Don't necessarily need to do it at this point. This is all you need essentially to get our SIP trunk to take calls and send it straight to the sales extension. So for now, we're going to click on submit, apply config, and as easy as that, if a user was or a person was to dial our SIP trunk now, it will dial our 1000 extension. That is, of course, providing that we have a user currently connected on the 1000 extension. Let's go to outbound routes to make sure that when a user dials a number from his extension, he can actually call out. Again, I'm going to give it a basic name. I'll call it outbound. Settings are obviously up to yourself. There is one setting we do need to change, and that's this trunk sequence for matched routes. So whenever a matched route, which we'll talk about here in dial plan, or dial patterns rather, whenever this specific route is matched, we want to take our call and route it via this trunk. This is the SIP trunk. Okay, dial patterns. What is a dial pattern? Well, basically, if, for example, you have 3 or 4 or maybe more SIP trunks on your PBX, you use one for just purely mobile calls, one is used purely to do your international calls out. You've got your other one for your telecom landlines, for your best cost routing essentially. Here's where you would then set up which of those to go and route to, or what route this should match. So we could have called this, for example, international outbound, and we could give it a prefix here of 44 followed by whatever, and it would then match any number that starts with 44, would then use, call it international outbound, for example. This example, we're going to route all calls no matter what through this SIP trunk, and that's all we need to do. So we're not going to need that. If you have a look here, you get your patterns. You can read up more on this on the internet, or it's pretty self-explanatory here as well. An X represents any digit between 0 and 9. The average telephone number in South Africa is usually 10 digits, so that'd be mobile phones, landlines, etc., etc. So I'm just going to go ahead and say match pattern of 10 X's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's worth noting you can also click on dial pattern wizards, and that'll go through maybe a little bit simpler for you to use. In our case, it is quite simple just to pop this in. That is essentially all we need. There are other options here. Once again, as always, go through them, play with them. You can click on the question marks for each one to figure it out. So for now, just to summarize, all we needed here was the name. We needed to choose which trunk to use. In our case, we only have the one, so we've chosen that. And we've said for this route, match any number that's dialed from an extension that contains 10 digits between 0 and 9 for each digit. That's it. So we click on submit. And we click on apply. And we now have a working PBX. Any caller that makes a call to our SIP trunk will route directly to our extension. If our extension is unanswered, it will go to voicemail. If you did set up the email section of the voicemail, the user would then get an email version of that. If not, generally with most voice over IP phones, you will get a flashing light that says you've got a voicemail. You'll certainly get a missed call notification, and obviously you can go ahead and check your voicemail on the system. That's it for this video, and we'll see you soon.